morning, everyone. So today I'm honored to have you in conversation, sir. So yesterday we had a look at his presentation and try to understand the cultural landscape that sir discussed on Mahabharata and Ramayana also further on. So today I'll be further discussing with him some questions related to the presentation continuation. So to begin with, yesterday you mentioned that you have taken into account all the archaeological evidence and it is either supporting your dates for the Mahabharata and Ramayana, or it at least does not contradict them. Could you elaborate on archaeological dates aligning with your dates work?
Namaskar everyone. So when we look at the evidence, usually it will start with this. Vijnana Buddhi, what we call scientific acronym. It has like 11 principles, 11 elements. One of the elements is Mahatva Mapan or Taratama, like a gradation, hierarchy. So if you are looking at evidence to solve a certain problem, you say which is the primary evidence, and that the answer may change depending on the context. So in my case, I started with say astronomy, and so once if I put forward my hypothesis, and my hypothesis was all astronomy descriptions of the Mahabharata text are descriptions of Mahabharata times. Which means now I have to look at all those descriptions and try to see which particular timeline it leads me to. So once I did that and I arrived at a specific number, now the question is what else is out there that either contradicts or supports it. And this is not something you wait for somebody else to figure it out. In fact, it's very important that when we do things, we must be our best critic. We don't wait for others to come and find holes in our theory. Therefore, what I say is, when I give a talk, usually there is a question-answer session afterwards. And many questions are actually frequently asked questions. But even before they ask, I'm saying, guys, please try to be crisp, because whatever questions you ask, I promise you there is not going to be any single question that you have asked and have not answered before. Which means somebody individual may not have asked it, but I have already asked myself and tried to answer it. So to answer your question now, in terms of archaeology evidence, all the archaeology evidence that we have found, and that's very important, either it has corroborated, that's a scientific term, meaning it tends to support, it has corroborated my timeline, or it has no relevance for it. So for example, yesterday we talked about Sonali chariot, and it's very unfortunate what happens. So Sonali chariot is found and they are doing all this analysis and dating, and that's great. But if you look at the newspaper news, the day Sonali chariot is found or the news comes out, like say it's 2000 BC, so like 4000 year old, what is the typical news that you see the next day? You will see something like Mahabharata hua 2000 BC. It is utterly nonsensical. It's stupid. It's unscientific. It's illogical. Actually, what has happened is we have found a chariot, whether a real chariot or a symbolical chariot, that is 2000 BC old. So we know that there is some evidence from 4000 years ago. It has no relevance for Mahabharata. But people try to connect. Why? Because Mahabharata has chariots. But the question, why it's illogical and stupid and unscientific, I said, because is the Mahabharata the only thing that has a chariot? We have the chariots right to our times, and we have the chariots to all the times. So all we have done is found the chariot. It's very useful discovery, but it has immediately no relevance to them, because the relevance, if you read Nyaya Darshana, it is actually a 12-step process. That some piece of evidence, how it gets connected to a specific event. And there is nothing connection in between. So yes, therefore any evidence. For example, yesterday briefly I discussed Krishna's Dwarka and sudden sea level rise around the world. Many people, it's I don't know if it's a sad or very unfortunate, but many people fail to understand that it is nothing but all archaeology evidence. So in that case, you have not found a pot or a pan. So therefore, our Bhagavad was there, and I said it's pan, pot, pan, or what, something else, like some object. In this case, there is no object. But what you have found is a change in the geology, change in the oceanography, change in the climatology, and you have captured it into the data. So all the evidence I can say that has been found, either it supports or is irrelevant.
Thank you so much, sir, for clarifying the archaeological into your framework. Further moving on, you have said that Mahabharata has over 300 astronomical references, and all of them point to the 5561 BCE. Why do you think Vyasa embedded such detailed astronomical data into the text? Could you perhaps walk us through one or two examples of this evidence and how you narrowed down the data?
So the question is, why did Vyasa possibly embedded like a 300 references? It's not actually one Vyasa. If you go to Valmiki Ramayana, Valmiki has embedded close to 600 astronomy references. And again, the question is still the same, why did Valmiki do it? And the answer is, in the Indian context, that is not a surprise. Just like in the morning session we saw, we have this whole temple architecture and the temple mannerisms and so on, but we have lost it in due course of time. If we understand that astronomy, I mean the Indian culture, civilization, and therefore the world civilization is actually aware that astronomy is time. So if you are writing a history, itihasa, iti ha asa, that means this is how it happened, and it is written for a specific purpose. So which is what? Dharmartha kama mokshana upadesha samanvitam purva vruttam katha yuktam itihasam pachishate. You are taking a historical event and telling it in a very entertaining form, and for what purpose? It serves as a guidebook for the char purushartha, the four purushartha. So there, because it's a past event, you need a description of it, like what happened, where it happened, but you also need a timestamp, like when it happened. And astronomy is time. I'll just give you a simple example. Look at our wall clock. Now we don't have many of them anymore. Many of them are digital. But usually, like if you look at the clock or your wristwatch, like 3 arms, like a short arm, a long arm, and a seconds arm. Think of a short arm as the position, as the movement of the sun. The long arm as the movement of the moon, and the seconds arm is like the movement of the earth around itself. And if you look at our panchang, if you look at our actual wall clocks, they are made based on a sundial. The sundial has eventually been standardized and now put it on the wall, just like this. That's exactly what it is. Now look at where the position of 6 is. 6 is at the bottom and the 12 is at the top. 6 is where it starts, like the morning sunrise. 12 is right at the goal, so to say, and it's coming down. So actually it has come from there. It was a very underground knowledge, so it wasn't a surprise. And if you read Mahabharata, it tells you that it's not a surprise. The information is used in such a way that if somebody wants to do some intervention with it, somebody wants to play with it, display with it, it will not have any effect. Just as an example, I will tell you like the bootstrapping. Out of 100,000 verses of Mahabharata, randomly, let's say you remove 100, randomly, you remove 100. The remaining verses will still take you to 5561 BC. Actually, the exercise I have done many times. Literally, you can do that as a random data generator. Then you, of course, you have to, just like a piece of pack of cards, you have to put those 100 back, shuffle it, remove additional 100, randomly 100. You can do as many times as you want. The evidence that is left in the remaining verses will still give you the same thing. That's how these references are spread throughout the 18 chapters or 18 parva of Mahabharata. Same thing for Mahabharata.
So, the third question. You have mentioned that hundreds of researchers have proposed different dates for Mahabharata. So, if all of them are using the same type of evidence, why are the results so vague in nature?
Everyone understood the question? If you take Mahabharata, there are now more than 100 now, 140 or so different researchers in the last 400 years, right from the time of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Okay, the first person who started this work was Nilakantha Chaturdar from Paitan in central Maharashtra. From there he was working in Kashi, and now there are about 140 plus. The question is, if they are using the same data set, if they are using the same Mahabharata text, how come they end up with the different dates? So something somewhere is going wrong. The first answer is, actually we assume that they are using the same dates, same data. Actually the real answer is they are not using the same data set. How many of you have heard of a fallacy known as cherry picking fallacy? How many of you have known that? Cherry picking fallacy. So there are 300 plus pieces of astronomy evidence. Like yesterday, ma'am, you talked about Professor R.N. Iyengar, right, for example. And he will talks of more evidence. I don't know where he talks of more evidence, and that's good if he's saying about it. But if you actually look at the work of Professor R. Iyengar, I'm just using that as one of the 140, he does not make use of, out of 300, more than 2 or 3 pieces of evidence. And even the 2 or 3 pieces of evidence Professor R. Iyengar makes use of, the date he claims, he cannot even show that those 3 pieces of evidence match for the date he is claiming. Now, I just don't need to be specific about Professor R. Iyengar, there are many more. The unfortunate situation, I find it in a way good, there are 100+ people, but actually the kind of research or the level of research we are doing is extremely pathetic. Extremely pathetic. Now, the social media has changed that discussion, like, because otherwise what? If you are controlling the power, that's what you do. Even I just had an interview on Akashvani. The lady who pushed for the interview, she succeeded in having me on the Akashvani mobile. But the person, like immediately a senior to her, when she put the proposal forward, you know what he said? He said, oh, this is like some extreme fanatic Hindu thing. This is how pathetic our situation is. So something that is extremely fanatic might be considered scientific. We have seen that in the leftist discourse, okay, like Guha and Romila Thapar. And then somebody who are doing very sincere work. Most of these people who are doing sincere work are not even from their original field. I mean, you just make a list of names, they are coming from outside. And they don't have any axe to grind, they don't have their personal agenda, they are not doing for money. None of this.
Yesterday, you heard the presenters discuss various topics using their research. So, from your perspective, what stood out to you? And what do you think we could do differently to strengthen our work further?
Yesterday's presentation.
Yes. So, you have seen various topics. Yeah. So, you give your suggestions on how we could improve further on strengthen the research field or both.
Okay. First thing, congratulations to everyone. About what, 10 or 12 yesterday? 10 folks. Amazing.
9.
Okay, I'm not good at counting, I guess. Okay, amazing presentation. I mean, phenomenal. So that's really amazing. I could sense the amount of work that has gone into, and you know, those people who presented, I hope and they should take the critique that the two professors were giving in an absolutely right way, and not only just listen and somehow defend it and hope that, oh, my presentation, thank God my presentation is over. No, this is just the beginning, if you think of it. Some of the suggestion, I would say, suggestion not just for these folks, for people in general, irrespective of the age and irrespective of their profession, is, for example, like say me as a novice coming outside this field, and the person who is presenting, and I am also guilty of it, we have to create a reason for the people to listen to us. Like, why should they even pay attention to what we are talking? And you know, so do not assume, because if you are working on it, what people tend to think is, oh, well, if I know it, everybody more or less knows about it. Don't make that assumption. Even some of the simplest thing we think everybody would know, you'll be amazed they don't know. So don't assume anything. You know, don't ramble on this. But say, okay, here it is. Or just ask the question. You know, usually they say, tell a story or ask a question. Have you heard about it? When you make them realize that they don't know it, very likely they are going to pay attention. So that's just one. And if there are other questions and if you have time, I'll add something else that you may think of.
So we value for that kind of feedback from you, sir. So yesterday you also spoke about the framework SCQA. I believe that is what you were trying to tell. Could you explain what that is and how researchers like us might apply to our field of work?
See, that SCQA is not something magical or dramatic. It is magical. It's not like something complicated. For example, if you know already what you are presenting, what is your outcome? Let's take this one presentation where she mentioned on the columns. Okay, something like she said there are 10 types of columns. I don't know, I'm just making it up. Yeah, she's saying 4 or 5, whatever it is. But you know, you say to get people's attention, you say, hey, you know what? In Indian architecture, there are these X number of columns. Okay, and they are very different than what is known in the West. Let's say that's your punchline. What it is. You have to start with how many of you have gone to Rome, how many of you have gone to Athens or something like this, or how many columns, have you seen those columns? Did you ever wonder what it is? So whatever people tend to know people, if you ask the question, what kind of columns are there in the Indian architecture, many of you would fail to answer that question. So that is how you created a somewhat a complication, a contrast. Hey, you know the Doric, Ionian and Corinthians. I could say that I have nothing to do with this subject. But now you ask me the Indian ones and I have no idea. So that's a complication. You said question, is there a simple way the Indian column structures can be summarized? The answer is yes. And now listen to me for the next 10 minutes. I mean, you don't say that, but that's exactly how you make it work.
Actually not just in this research area, it can be applied to other research fields also, I think, to generate a sense of curiosity and then move forward with it.
Yeah, I will tell you one anecdote on this. There were some of my co-researchers, you can say, working in the same field. You might know the names. Without mentioning the names, I would say, these few individuals, they say, hey, I submit the papers to conferences. I mean, these are grown-up people in their 40 plus. I submit my abstract to conferences, but they rejected it. And I say, why did they reject it? Because these people, they had a great research, but they were, doesn't matter what the conference subject is, they were simply sending whatever they wanted to send. Hey, here is what I have worked on, here is no connection with the conference. And this, you can use this SCPA framework to connect whatever you have done with your columns. You can come to a chemical engineering conference and you can connect the columns if you want. You can go to a psychology conference and you can connect the columns, whatever you have done. Okay? I mean, there are limits to it, but you can actually do it. So again, this gives you a framework. You know what answer you are going to give, but you have to build a story backwards, at least that.
So moving on, I really enjoyed the presentation yesterday, especially the way you have shown the linkages and the comparisons between various events along with the Dwarka event, the flooding event. So that was very interesting for me. So how do you personally go on preparing for your presentation to focus on a particular topic and elaborate further on it? And do you think you follow a set process to prepare your presentations, and does it change depending on the audience typology?
Okay, everyone understood the question, like how do I prepare for a presentation? I'll just share my 2 cents. Everyone has a different way of preparing and there is no one method. I'll just share mine. And that will combine all the different questions you asked here. For example, as a framework, if that helps you, you can use it. Preparing for it, like so talking to Dr. Tanisha, I asked like what's the audience like, demography, who am I expecting, who is presenting and so on. Sometimes you get this information, other times you don't. But you have to make some assumptions, like these are the kind of people I may be getting, and I could be wrong in reality, that's fine. Every time I learn, whether I'm right or wrong, I always learn from this. And I put forward 4 points. I say, what do they know? I have to make the assumption, what do they know? And please follow this stress. So depending on what they know, they mean my audience, let's say. Based on that, they believe certain things. Is it fair? Because your knowledge decides what you believe. Based on what you believe, that generates your feelings. And based on the feelings you have, the kind of things you do. That's what you do. For example, like somebody asks you, hey, you are from India, like is that Mahabharata, Ramayana, like Krishna, Rama, are they real people or these are mythological characters? Suppose somebody asks you a question. In America, they do ask also. So now, based on what you know, based on what you therefore believe, therefore what you feel, and therefore you do the action, which is how you respond. You say, I never took that much interest. Like you get thinking, I'm not actually a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. I'll just take a digression and say, if somebody says that, my wife has a response to that. Somebody says, oh, I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. She says, basically that means you don't do anything. Okay? So like, I don't do anything, don't ask me anything, something like this. Now once you have a judgment about these 4, I turn this upside down. And I ask in my presentation, at the end of my presentation, whether they do it or not, what is it that I hope they do after listening to me, that they are not doing right now. You follow? So if I want them to do these 3 things, I have to generate a certain belief, certain feelings in them. What are the feelings I need to generate? For example, in this case, that Krishna was real and his Dwarka was a real, and so on. And then it was there 7,500 years ago. Suppose that's the feeling. And from that feeling, what kind of belief I need to set in their mind. In order to set those beliefs, what do I need to tell them? So now I come to this Krishna's Dwarka. Did I tell, like, if the Krishna's Dwarka, here is how the history from Puranas or, Bhagavad Purana. Then it says, Purana, that's fine, but where is the evidence? So now I show the evidence around the world. Now this is funny, that everything is not in my hand. It's a relation. Because even I can show the whole evidence, like when my podcast are done, sometimes I look at the comments. They say, this guy talked for 1 hour, where is the evidence? And the problem is people even don't understand what is evidence. Okay? So of course, there is a limitation to it, but I just turn it backwards and then I say how much time I have. In fact, it doesn't matter how much time I have. If I have 10 minutes, if I have 20 minutes, if I have 1 hour, I cannot make more than 3 points. Actually, 3 is too many. Very likely I can make 2 points, but if one of those 2 fails and people show me stern faces, then I'll put my 3rd point or something. But I can make 2 points or I can make 3 points. And me talking about those 3 points is my presentation. I think that's how generally it's happening.
Thank you, sir. So your work brings together astronomy, archaeology and textual analysis. How do you balance these 3 strands of research when constructing a coherent historical narrative?
Okay, that's a great question. In fact, if you are listening carefully, the very first talk, Dr. Tanisha, her presentation, and then some other presenter also, and she gave a very good answer. I'm trying to think. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama. Can you raise a hand if that was your presentation? Yeah, your presentation, your mom's presentation, right? No, your presentation. Okay, sorry. So she gave a presentation, and somebody, the professors asked, like, which one you're going to focus on, and her answer was all 3. Right? Actually, that is the answer. In fact, Krishna in Uddhava Gita, it tells Uddhava, he says, Shruti Pratyaksham Aitiyam Anumanam Chatushnayam Pramaneshu Anavasthana Vikalpatsa Virajyate. And so in science, yesterday I showed you a triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing. Okay, or the Gautama's Nyaya Darshana. Krishna goes one step further. He says, unless you do a quadrant relation, Shruti, Pratyaksham, Aitiyam, Anumanam, Chatushtayam, Pramaneshu, Anavasthana, unless you do the quadrant relation, your knowledge will always remain incomplete and unstable. So to answer your question, like if I'm looking at, do I focus on textual analysis, do I look at only astronomy as a more one, do I ignore archaeology, do I look at climatology? No, I have to take into account every piece of evidence that is available to me. So epigraphs, for example. If the epigraph exists, I'm going to look at it. If Purana has something to say on the Mahabharata, I'm going to look at it. But just like I said, Vijnana Buddhi, scientific acumen, I also have to have a sense of priority, sense of Mahatma Mahabharata gradation or Tarkamya.
If we accept a dating of the Mahabharata 5561 BCE, what does that mean for our understanding of India's cultural landscape and proto-urban settlements that came later into picture in the 6th millennium BCE?
The question is, if we accept my dating, it's not my dating, well, it may be my work, but the evidence is from Mahabharata or Ramayana. But let's say that if that is accepted, what it means, so what? Okay, you came up with the date, thank you, we clap for you, now get lost. Okay, so what does it mean? Actually, it means a lot of things. For example, in our text, even in our internal discourse, see the masters who built us with the Aryan invasion theory, it's not Aryan invasion theory, it's Aryan invasion nonsense. Remember, I showed you that 5-step framework yesterday? Other than, you were not able to, scientifically speaking, out of those 5 elements, you were not able to fill in even one of the 5 elements for Aryan invasion. Just to give them a benefit of doubt, I will say if there is anything that can be filled, it is in the evidence stage, and it is only this, that the languages of Europe are connected with the languages of India and through Sanskrit. Okay, so that is there. So only that is there. But when did they figure it out? They figured it out after 1785. Sir William Jones comes to Kolkata and he comes across a Panini. Until then, Europeans knew that their languages are somehow connected, but they had no idea why or how so. So the Intel, everyone has a laptop and it says Intel inside. The Intel insight into the entire field of linguistics is Panini's grammar. You take it off and the linguistics doesn't function. So my point is, Aryan invasion theory falls off instantaneously. In fact, all our Puranas, which we are just fighting around, and Guptas and Mauryas and how to fix them, Buddha and everything, that everything starts falling off. All the Puranic references start falling off. Not only that, actually that dating, including the dating of Ramayana, the 14,000 years, it starts explaining all the evidence, the empirical evidence we are finding into different sciences, such as agriculture, navigation, astronomy around the world. So actually many people write that to me. They said, I was studying certain area, maybe archaeology, or maybe Puranas, and those genealogies, and it was not fitting in. But once I looked at your work, and I'm not aware of their Puranic work, but they said their genealogy, like Parijitar, and if you have read those all start falling in place and fitting very nicely.
Thank you, sir. So, many of us young researchers exploring cultural landscapes, history and urban studies are present here among the crowd. So, what advice would you give us, especially when our work challenges mainstream narratives?
Well, not just for challenging mainstream narrative, but in general, whether you are working on some project or your master's PhD degree. This has happened, and it astonished me. I'll just tell you as an anecdote. This one person who had already had a PhD from Delhi area, and one professor told me Nilesh worked with her for the upcoming conference. So we were on a Zoom call, let's say, and I said, what do you want to present in the next conference? So she said, well, Professor Balram Singh told me to talk to you, so you tell me. I said, what do you have in mind? She said, no sir, really I don't have in mind, you just suggest. I said, what was your PhD in? So she gave the answer to that, like astronomy in certain Brahmana Grantha of our text. I said, what made you do this research, your PhD on the astronomy of a Brahmana Grantha? And she said, sir, this is आपने तो बहुत बढ़िया प्रश्न पूछा, which means she doesn't know the answer. Now I understand that many times a professor may suggest something, okay, but even professor suggests something, you have to at least as a student ask, why do you think this is important subject? Okay, and actually you have to challenge the mediocrity. I mean, the professors have to do their job in challenging mediocrity. Students have to do their job in challenging mediocrity. Why this is important? I'll give you an example. When Smriti Irani, when she became a HR minister or education minister before, the one of the good things she did many great things, and then she was called controversial, but that's a different subject. I don't know what means by controversial. She did some great things. One of the things she did is like digitization, PDF filing of all the PhD thesis. Mahabharata being my subject interest, somebody sent me the link, I went there, typed Mahabharata as a keyword, and the timing is like the latest last 10 years. And lots of I don't know how many, hundreds of PhD thesis came on Mahabharata. I took the top 20, downloaded them, and in less than 1 hour, this is also important, I am a fast reader, but not that fast. In 1 hour, I could read all 20 theses. That tells you something about my speed reading, but also it tells you about the quality of those theses also. And then it was basically copy-paste, no exception. And it was a random one because I just pulled one. So this is a mediocrity, and we have to, I'm just taking again this platform, I do it everywhere. I always want to bring it up. So to answer your question now, what do? We have to ask the question. Therefore, I mentioned yesterday in one comment, Purva Paksha. Before you work in that area, suppose you are working on the columns, I'm just using that because that's all I could remember. You are working on the columns, you have to go and find out what others have done so far in this work. It doesn't have to be very exhaustive, but at least like a top 10 studies. And then now you have to say, something that they have done a great job, but something that they did not mention, which is worth mentioning, and now that is your project. So try to find out what is new in your project. What is something new? It can be a very small new or a big new, but it has to be there. There is no point in copy pasting things. When you are on your deathbed, you will not be very happy about it. So just ask the question, then use SCQA, and you are on the run.
Thank you, sir. So finally, wrapping it up on a lighter note, if you could time travel to witness one moment from the Mahabharata or Ramayana, exactly has it happened? Which event did you choose and why?
Now, the answer may sound a cliche, but this is basically when Krishna was advising Arjun on the first day. I think just before the war began, it would have been a very fascinating scene. And how could Sanjaya grasp it? Now Sanjaya, you see the blessing that was given by Vyasa wasn't something like Sanjaya sitting in a room in front of a TV. That's not the case, although that's what we think. In fact, it has been told that even when in the war, two people are communicating, he will be able to sense the conversation going on between them. And we can sense that, two birds talking to each other and so on. So I think it will be very fascinating as to what that first day was, not just the Bhagavad Gita, but the first day, what was the formation, what was the mood. And so if I have a chance, time machine, I would love to go there, back to 16 October 561 BCE.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your insights, and it was really enriching, and I want to go back. And I was sharing with you also personally yesterday that I want to see the cities of Mahabharata and Ramayana through the architectural urban planning perspective. So through you, I'm going to further elaborate on that in my research is what I was thinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.